we're just going to dive right in. Really pretty blue, so I'm going to mix white and blue. And I'm going to go up and down like this, vertically. On the left side, I want it to be more blue. So maybe have a little bit less white in some parts and maybe a little more white in other parts. Just play with that vertical brush stroke for a second. And then gradually, as we go over, we're going to add a little bit of red into our blue. So it's going to start to get a little bit of a different shade of blue. Just a little bit. I'm still using white though. But notice how it gets a little less bright. Okay, that's what we want. And if I do it with less white, it'll get even darker. So mostly blue, just a little bit of red, not as much white. It's going to give us an even darker, a little bit of a darker blue. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. And then if I add more red, it's going to start to turn more of a purpley kind of color. So I want that too, as I get over to the right. So I want it to get a little more purpley over here. Just vertical brush strokes. Notice I'm not filling the whole thing in because I don't want to. We're going to play. This is going to be so much fun. Now, while this is still wet, I'm going to clean my brush. Get that paint off. And then dry it. And then we're going to just add white. Just white to the brush. Maybe even a little bit of water mixed into the white if your white is really heavy bodied, so that your paint is going to blend better. And then I'm going to go into the places I didn't put paint. Notice how I spread the paint around, but I didn't fill it in all the way. I like doing that. And then I'm going to continue with that vertical stroke. But I might start to wiggle it like this horizontally. Or just pull it horizontally like that. So now we're playing with like kind of the paint moving a different way. Okay, that's really fun to do. You can always add more blue back in. But I want to wiggle. Just using the brush open and then wiggling. Remember, add a little bit of water into your white if it's not blending. And wiggle in between. And rub and blend into the paint that's there. So see, I can even go over that paint and just kind of wiggle it out like that. And then pull down and pull over. So play, pushing the paint around until it kind of looks cool to you. So much fun to do this. Monet is like Impressionism. So we really don't want to get trapped in like feeling that it has to look realistic or have any kind of set brush stroke to it. It's just like you're playing here. I'm going to have a lot of white in the upper right hand corner. I want it to be really light. I can even just take some white and like wiggle it in the middle. Bigger, longer brush strokes. Or you can do shorter wiggles, shorter bursts. Perfect. So I kind of have a fun base to start with. If you want, like if you really like the way that your background turned out and you don't want it to smudge around as you layer, you can definitely blow dry it to give it a little bit more of a solid stay put kind of thing. Or you can allow your layering to kind of push the background paint around a little bit as we go, which either way is fine. I'm just kind of adding a little bit more down here, more blue. So adjust it until you're happy with it. Make sure you have the canvas covered though. We want at least a layer of paint here. You can always add more of these colors back in at any time. Okay, I'm gonna let it go. It's so hard to let it go. It's so fun to play with this kind of texture. I'm gonna blow dry it though so that it stays. Now I'm gonna create some green. I'm gonna start layering the lily pads. So one of the reasons I wanted to do a lily painting is because I just had a baby and I named her Lily. My daughter actually named her, my older daughter. So I'm gonna take a filbert, and to make green, I'm gonna use yellow and blue. Just yellow and blue. And then I want it to be kind of pastel, so I'm gonna use a lot of white. Now, if you want it to look a little more earthy, you can always add a tiny, tiny bit of red into it to make it look more earthy. The more red you add, the more dark, like earthy it's gonna get, like the less vibrant. So if you want it to be more muted, more earthy, use a little more red. But if you go too far, it's just gonna start to look brown. So be careful. I'm just doing a little bit. And then I'm gonna start making some horizontal brush strokes, just pulling across like that. Super easy. And get a variety of sizes. So some can be a little longer, some can be a little shorter. And they're like smushed ovals, like pancakes. And then you can create some different shades. So maybe some parts look a little darker, so more yellow and blue and less white. And you can still mix in that red to make it more earthy. And then put that towards the bottom side of the shape or the edges. So now we have more than one shade of green. And then maybe we make a third shade that has more yellow and white in it. So you want to have at least 3 shades of green. See how I have 3 shades over here? Play around with it. I'm going to put that towards the top. Make sure it's noticeable though. If you do it and it's not noticeable at all, try to change it so it looks noticeable. And then you can have some more little dashes in there if you want. And we can make some little faint marks. So don't feel afraid of spreading the color around. Okay, then at the bottom, I want my colors to get a little darker. So I'm going to use more blue and yellow, and then maybe a little bit of black mixed in to my green. Ooh, getting dark. Okay. So then I can add that down here. Same kind of shapes. Some bigger, some smaller. They're really clustered up. Then I can add a little more black to the green or a darker shade and put that towards the bottom. Maybe that's a little too dark. It should be noticeably darker, but it doesn't have to be too crazy. Sometimes I go a little crazy. And just dab it towards the bottom. Then you can use some of that darker color up above too, to just sort of give a punch to the bottom of these ones. And you can add some of the lighter color to the ones on the bottom too. So maybe just a little more yellow and white to the base color. And now that we have the lilies in, you can play with the background a little bit more. So sometimes you could just take a smaller square brush. We did the background with kind of a big square brush. And you can come in with your background colors. So like your blues, you can wiggle around. You can hold down like that to give some shadow to the lily pad in the water, like a little reflection. So you can even do that with like a green blue. I'm just gently pulling down from the shape, and you can wiggle to create a little bit of a reflection kind of color. You can do that down here too, but maybe we do it a little darker with more blue. And you can add anything you want into the background. So if you want to touch anything up, using a little bit of water to help things flow a bit better can be helpful. And you can do any more texture you want to the background. So I'm adding some of this like turquoise into the background for fun. Notice if you add a little bit of water, it's going to help the paint smush around a little differently. And then if things get too crazy, just use a ton of white to soften it into the background. Add more white if you want parts to look a little lighter. This is where you get to really play. And you can use a round brush to add some more highlights and shadows to the lily pads. So you can add some more of that lighter shade of green down below. You can use more white. And again, I like to keep the lighter colors towards the top and the darker colors towards the bottom. And they're clustered up. They're not perfect shapes, but you can do different things. Notice I do some like little indications that are a little less focal. And then we can do some really dark kind of colors in a minute, but take a minute to make sure your blues and all of the stuff in the background looks the way you want. You can add a little more blue under, kind of wiggle around, smooth out some brush strokes. You can just change brushes and play with your texture a little bit. Let it be relaxing. Try not to judge yourself as you're doing this. Try and don't judge your painting too much. Just kind of look at it and let yourself be inspired and add things as you go. Just zigzag wiggling. Then I can go into that super dark green. And add some more, maybe more intricate lines around the edges and the bottoms of these. Maybe as I come down, my green gets even a little darker on my shadows. And then we can always add more to the background, but I want to place the lilies because sometimes that really ties it together and then you realize, well, I didn't really need to add more. So it prevents you from going too far. You could use just any round brush for this. However big you want your lilies, maybe go bigger with the brush if you want them bigger. And I'm just going to do pink. So red and white, maybe just a touch of yellow to give it a coral vibe. Red and white. Or you could just do red and white. I'm going to start with kind of a medium to dark shade, so it's not too light or too dark. I'm just kind of going with medium shade here. And to make my shapes, I'm going to start with a U or a V type shape. And then just fill it in with little brush strokes pulling down. Some can be different sizes. I'm going to do 3 down here. I'm going to make this one a little bigger. Then I'm going to do like a little bit up here. These are going to be really small. One more little one here. Okay. And then you can add a little bit more red to the brush and add some to the bottom part. And then a little more white to add to the top. And you can keep your brush strokes really loose. And then you want to create a shadow for the lilies on the lily pad. So we'll do a purple for that. You can just use red and a little bit of blue. And then that'll create a shadow that we can put towards the bottom. The more blue you use, the darker it's going to get. We want a dark color, like a darker. Okay, and then if you want to adjust anything, you could always come into like a really small brush and play around. Maybe I want to get some pure white in there on the lilies. And if you want to get any more broad brush strokes, you can. Just get a bigger brush, play around. Maybe I want some more white in the background. Just swoosh it in. This is where you do your finishing touches. Some more highlights. Sometimes I like to get a big brush in the end to loosen up my brush strokes. If you struggle with perfectionism, using a bigger brush is really helpful for that. Extremely helpful for that. And then again, I can get some more broader brush strokes on my lily. Maybe I want a little more yellow in there. And that color, yellow and white. Then I can kind of dab that towards the top, which gives it maybe like the indication of like the center part. And maybe I finish with the small brush and some really dark like black. So I can always mix, like take a little tiny liner brush or just a super small brush, get a bunch of water on it, mix that into your black paint so your black paint gets kind of runny. And then you can go in and like almost like outline things, give it a little bit of a caricature. You don't have to do that. You could just leave it a little bit more pastel and less darks in there if you don't want it. But this can kind of help with outlining and pulling things out and adding to the shadows and just making things jump out a little bit more if you give it a little more darkness, especially towards the bottom. I'm only going to do this at the bottom.